So the second question that I said was of concern here was the question of who gets to pick winners and losers. And why are we concerned about that? So my argument is that this is important because users and network providers will make very different decisions. And so depending on who chooses, we get very different types of applications. So there are two reasons. If I'm a user, then I just choose the applications that I find most attractive, that best meet my needs. That's relatively easy. If I'm a network provider, I actually think about something else. I do care to some extent whether users will like the innovation, but I also care about other things. Does this application compete with me? Will it reduce my profits? Will it create lots of bandwidth and thereby creates costs of managing this bandwidth? And the answers to these questions will often look different from the answer that users would have given. And again, Skype is a really good example. In Europe, lots of mobile operators ban Skype on their cellular internet connection. They have said that they do this because internet telephony reduces their profit and they don't want this to happen. Well, users don't like that. Users want to use Skype on their mobile internet connection. But if network providers control and not users, there is nothing they can do about it. So the second reason why it makes a difference who chooses is that even if the network providers would like to choose the applications that users want to, because of this uncertainty, they don't necessarily know what that is. Nobody really knows until users actually like it. If someone had described Twitter to you a few years ago, most people would have said, this is totally crazy. People will never want to use 140 characters to broadcast, updates to the world. And yet today, lots of people are using Twitter, and we only know because people could try. Nobody had to determine in advance whether that was a good idea. So these two ideas, we want to maintain the size and diversity of the innovator pool, and we want users, not network providers, to pick winners and losers, are behind this idea that maybe we need to constrict network providers' ability to charge application and content providers for better transport. So fourth question is, should there be any exceptions? And I won't really talk about them right now. Everybody agrees there should be exceptions for security, that network providers should be allowed to engage in reasonable network management. But then this is a big debate about what exactly it means to engage in reasonable network management. And in the Comcast case, we saw that Comcast thought blocking the torrent was reasonable network management, whereas the FCC thought, no, it's actually not reasonable network management if you single out an application to manage bandwidth on your network if there are other non-discriminatory ways of doing so. But, that's a big debate. So, in sum, if we think about it, underlying this idea of network neutrality is a certain model of innovation. And people think that this is what has made innovation successful on the internet. It means lots of different and very diverse innovators independently decide how they want to innovate. And then users decide how they want to use the network. And the network providers cannot interfere with either of these choices. And if there is uncertainty or user needs are very heterogeneous, we think that this will give us more and better innovation than having less innovators, less diverse innovators. And we also think that this innovation will better meet user needs. But if you think about it, blocking or allowing network providers to charge access charges would break this mechanism at its core. And so the people who are in favor of network neutrality would argue that it reduces application innovation, it reduces the value of the internet to users and to society, and the third aspect that I haven't talked about, it also removes a lot of features that were at the core of the internet's political and social and cultural potential. So the internet's ability to improve democratic discourse or to facilitate political organization and action or to create an environment in which anybody can participate. So you might ask, well, is anybody doing anything about it if it's so important? And so I want to spend just 2 minutes to give you a brief update of what's going on here. In 2005, the FCC came up with something that was called the Internet Policy Statement. And it basically said, you can read what it said. And the interesting thing about this statement was that on the one hand, it's a policy statement, and as a matter of administrative law, it's very unclear what a policy statement is. In general, policy statements are not enforceable. Still, the FCC went out and told everybody in merger proceedings, Congress, well, be careful, network providers, if you violate this Internet Policy Statement, we will enforce it. And so it wasn't particularly clear what the status was. When Comcast blocked BitTorrent, the FCC actually did enforce the policy statement and said that what Comcast was doing would violate the statement and that they had to stop. Then in October 2009, the FCC started a proceeding called Preserving the Open Internet proceeding. And as part of that proceeding, they are effectively trying to do 3 things. The first is they say, we need to provide clarity that we want to have rules and not just a principle. So they are turning the 4 principles, these 4, into rules. And while these are framed in terms of users' rights, they phrase them as obligations on the network providers. So they don't say consumers are entitled to, they say network providers are not allowed to block. And the same for all the 4 policy principles that you see here. And then on top of that, they put 2 additional rules. The first is an anti-discrimination rule, which basically covers all the issues that I talked about. It says, you also can't discriminate, and quality of service is not okay, and you cannot charge content and application providers. And the final rule is a rule that says, if you engage in blocking, for example, for reasonable network management, you have to tell everybody. And the idea is that at least by telling everybody, users will know what's going on, application providers will know what's going on, and so hopefully unhappy users can switch, and application providers can adapt to what's going on the network. So that's a very complicated proceeding. I'm happy to talk about it more in the questions and comments. For now, I just want to stop and thank you for your attention.
Yeah.